Medellin, Colombia, August 1983. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the heat is sitting heavy on the asphalt. In a crowded strip mall parking lot, a white Ford LTD is idling. The air conditioning is fighting a losing battle against the sun, but inside that car the driver feels something he hasn't felt in years. He feels safe. Safe. It's a dangerous word in this line of work, usually the last word a man thinks before the lights go out. But Dario Sepulveda believes he has earned it. He checks the rearview mirror. He isn't looking for assassins. He isn't looking for black vans or men in masks. He is looking for the police. Real police. He scans the reflection for uniforms, for flashing lights, for the authority of the state. Seeing nothing but shoppers and pedestrians, he relaxes his grip on the steering wheel. Beside him, in the passenger seat, sits a young boy barely 5 years old. The boy is oblivious to the tension that has defined his father's life for the last decade. He is happily eating an ice cream cone, watching the world go by through the tinted glass. Dario looks at his son, Michael Corleone, and feels a surge of justification. He tells himself he did this for the boy. He tells himself that running away was a moral act, a rescue mission to save his son from the madness consuming Miami. But deep down, beneath the fatherly pride, there is the heavy weight of the suitcase in the trunk, a suitcase filled with cash that doesn't belong to him. Dario Sepulveda believes that he has successfully divorced his wife. He believes that the thousands of miles between Medellin and Miami are a shield. He is about to learn in the most brutal way possible that you can divorce a spouse, but you cannot divorce the godmother. To understand why a man would sit in a parking lot waiting to die while his son eats ice cream, you have to understand the woman he left behind. You have to go back to Miami, months earlier, to the house where the walls were closing in. By 1983, Griselda Blanco was no longer just running a business. She was living inside a fortress of paranoia. The golden age of the cocaine cowboys was rotting from the inside out. The money was still coming in, millions of dollars stuffed into PVC pipes and buried in the backyard, but the trust was gone. The DEA was tightening the noose, turning lieutenants into informants, and the pressure was cracking the foundation of the organization. In this phase of the timeline, the paranoia phase, the rules of the game had shifted. It was no longer about expansion, it was about elimination. If you knew where the bodies were buried, you were a liability. If you knew the phone numbers, you were a loose end. Griselda, fueled by a toxic cocktail of high-grade merchandise and sleepless nights, began to see enemies at her own dinner table. And sitting right across from her, night after night, was Dario. Dario Sepulveda was her third husband. He was handsome, arrogant, and carried himself with the swagger of a man who believes he is married into royalty. He made the classic mistake of confusing proximity with power. He thought that because he shared her bed, he shared her authority. He thought that because he was the father of her youngest and favorite son, the little prince Michael, he was untouchable. He believed that biology trumped business. It was a fatal miscalculation. In Griselda's world, there is no line between family and employee. There are only assets and threats, and Dario was rapidly becoming a threat. The marriage had turned into a war zone. Arguments weren't just domestic disputes, they were power struggles involving loaded weapons on the nightstand. Dario wanted control. He wanted the respect of the other cartel bosses, who viewed him merely as Griselda's husband. But more than that, he wanted out. He saw the inevitable collapse coming. He saw the indictments, the police surveillance, the friends disappearing one by one. He decided he wasn't going to go down with the ship. But you don't just hand in a resignation letter to the Black Widow. You don't ask for a separation. Dario knew that leaving meant taking leverage. He needed an insurance policy. So he devised a plan that was as bold as it was suicidal. He decided to take the two things Griselda valued more than her own life, her reputation and her son. The escape was executed with military precision. Dario waited for a window of opportunity, a moment when the chaotic household was distracted. He didn't just pack a bag, he raided the treasury. He took documents, he took jewelry, and he took cash, millions of dollars that were the lifeblood of the organization's defense fund. But the money was just the insult. The kidnapping was the injury. He took Michael Corleone. He strapped the boy into a car, drove to a private airfield and fled the country. He ran back to Colombia, back to his home turf in Medellin, believing that the borders would protect him. When Griselda walked into the empty room and realized what had happened, the reaction wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't tears. It was a terrifying, cold rage that terrified even her hardened hitmen. Max Mermelstein, a key associate who witnessed this era, later described the atmosphere in the house as walking into a gas chamber. Griselda didn't scream about lost love. She screamed about disrespect. Dario hadn't just left her. He had stolen from the crown. By taking the money, he made her look weak to her rivals in Cali. By taking the boy, he challenged her control over her own bloodline. Rumors began to swirl in the Miami underworld instantly. The word on the street was that La Madrina was losing her grip. If she couldn't even control her own husband, how could she control the distribution routes? If a man could rob her and walk away, then she was finished. The sharks were circling. Griselda knew that this wasn't just a custody battle. This was a battle for survival. She had to send a message that would be heard all the way back to the streets of New York and Los Angeles. The hunt began immediately. Griselda activated every contact she had in Colombia. She didn't care about the money anymore. She would spend 10 times what Dario stole just to find him. She placed a bounty on his head that could buy a city block in Medellin. But Dario was smart. He knew how she operated. He stayed mobile, moving between safe houses, using different cars, never staying in one place for too long. He relied on the chaos of Medellin, a city that was effectively lawless, to hide him. However, Dario had a specific weakness, a psychological blind spot that Griselda knew how to exploit. Dario was a man who feared the underworld, but he still respected the official law. He was running from criminals, so he naturally trusted authority figures. He believed that if the police stopped him, he could bribe them. He believed that a uniform meant safety, or at least a negotiation he could win. He didn't understand that Griselda's reach extended into the precincts and the patrol cars. She had turned his safe haven into a hunting ground, paying off local police not to arrest him, but to look the other way when the time came. It took weeks, but eventually the information came through. A low-level informant, looking to clear a debt, sold Dario's location. He was frequenting a specific shopping center, taking the boy for ice cream in the afternoons, trying to maintain a facade of a normal life. Griselda received the call in Miami. She didn't ask for him to be brought back. She didn't ask for a negotiation. She gave a simple 2-word order that would seal his fate. The team she assembled wasn't a group of street thugs. She needed to get close to him without him panicking. She needed him to lower his guard for just 3 seconds. That's all it would take. They knew he checked his mirrors. They knew he was watching for hitmen. So they decided to give him exactly what he was looking for, a police officer. Back in the parking lot in Medellin, the heat is still rising. Dario finishes checking the mirror. The white Ford LTD is vibrating gently. Michael is licking the last of the melting ice cream from his fingers. Dario puts the car in gear, ready to back out, ready to move to the next safe house. He feels smart. He feels like he has won. Then he hears it, the distinct high-pitched whine of a motorcycle engine. It cuts through the noise of the traffic. Dario freezes. He looks to his left. A motorcycle pulls up alongside the driver's side door. The rider is wearing a helmet with a dark visor, but on the chest of his jacket, shining in the afternoon sun, is a badge. It looks official. It looks like the law. Dario's heart rate spikes, but not out of terror, out of relief. It's just a cop. Probably wants a bribe. Probably a traffic violation. Dario rolls down the window. He puts on his charming smile, the one he used to court the godmother years ago. He prepares to talk his way out of a ticket, reaching for his wallet to pull out a few pesos. He looks at the rider, expecting a demand for license and registration. He doesn't see the rider's hand move to his waist. He doesn't see the badge for what it really is, a distraction, a shiny piece of metal designed to make him look left while death comes from the right. The window is down. The air conditioning escapes into the hot afternoon. The barrier is gone. And in that split second, the smile on Dario's face begins to fade, replaced by a sudden, horrific understanding. He isn't looking at a police officer. He is looking at a receipt. The window of the white Ford LTD is fully down now. The air conditioning, the only barrier against the suffocating Colombian heat, escapes into the parking lot. Dario Sepulveda looks up at the man on the motorcycle. He is still smiling, that practiced, charming smile, the one that had bought him so many second chances in Miami. His hand is already moving toward his pocket, his fingers brushing against the leather of his wallet. He is running the calculation in his head. $50 for a speeding ticket, maybe $100 if the registration is expired. In his mind, this is a transaction, a simple cost of doing business. But the officer doesn't ask for a license. He doesn't ask for registration. He doesn't say a word about a traffic violation. He simply leans in. He leans in close enough that Dario can smell the exhaust fumes on his jacket, close enough to see the scratches on the helmet's visor. And in that intimate frozen second, the officer breaks protocol. He doesn't use the commanding shout of a policeman. He whispers. According to associates who later pieced together the events of that afternoon, the words were not a threat. They were a greeting. The godmother sends her love. The smile on Dario's face doesn't have time to turn into a scream. It just freezes, a grotesque mask of sudden, dawning horror. His eyes dart from the helmet to the badge on the rider's chest, that shiny silver shield of authority he had trusted just 10 seconds ago. He realizes finally that the badge is a lie, the uniform is a costume, and the man behind the visor isn't here to enforce the law. He is here to rewrite it. The rider's gloved hand, which had been resting near his waist, snaps up. There is no fumble, no hesitation. It is a movement practiced 1,000 times in empty warehouses and remote jungle clearings. The sunlight catches the barrel of a .38 caliber revolver. It's a small gun, a professional's tool. It doesn't jam, it doesn't spray, and it doesn't leave shell casings behind. The parking lot is bustling. Shoppers are walking past with grocery bags. A woman is loading her trunk 2 cars away. They see the uniform. They see the conversation. They assume it is a routine stop. They are expecting a ticket. Instead, the air splits open. 3 shots, then 3 more. They aren't the thunderous booms of a shotgun. They are sharp cracking reports that sound deceptively like firecrackers. At point-blank range, there is no missing. The bullets tear through the open window, finding their mark with terrifying precision. Dario Sepulveda is slammed back against his seat, the life exiting his body before his hand can even leave his wallet. The ice cream cone in the passenger seat drops. Silence descends on the parking lot. It is a heavy, stunned silence where the brain tries to catch up with the eyes. The shoppers stop. The woman loading her trunk drops her bags. For a heartbeat, nobody moves. They are waiting for the officer to call for an ambulance, to shout for backup. But the officer does something that chills the blood of everyone watching. He doesn't holster his weapon immediately. He leans further into the car. He isn't checking for a pulse. He knows his work is done. He is reaching for the boy. Michael Corleone, 5 years old, is sitting inches away from where his father just died. He is physically unharmed, not a scratch on him. The precision of the shooter was absolute. But as the assassin reaches across the center console, unbuckling the child's seatbelt with a strange, eerie gentleness, the horror of the situation crystallizes. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a random carjacking. This was an extraction. The assassin pulls the boy from the car. The crowd, paralyzed by the sight of the uniform and the gun, does nothing. Who intervenes when the police are the ones pulling the trigger? The hitman lifts the boy onto the motorcycle, shielding him with his own body, not out of kindness, but because the boy is the cargo. The boy is the asset. The father was just the packaging, and the packaging has been discarded. Before he kicks the motorcycle into gear, the assassin leaves one final thing behind. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out the prop that made it all possible. The fake police badge. He tosses it onto the dashboard, right next to Dario's slumped body. It lands with a metallic clatter. It is a receipt, a calling card. It tells the local Medellin police, who arrive minutes later, exactly who did this. It tells them that their authority is rented, but Griselda Blanco's authority is absolute. The motorcycle roars to life, weaving through the stunned pedestrians and exiting the parking lot, disappearing into the chaotic traffic of Medellin. The domino effect of those 6 shots was instantaneous. Within 72 hours, the word had spread through every cartel kitchen and stash house from Bogota to Miami. The narrative was clear. Griselda Blanco had reached across international borders, penetrated a foreign city, tricked her husband into a trap using his own trust in the law, and executed him in broad daylight. Michael Corleone was flown back to Miami almost immediately. He was returned to his mother, the little prince restored to his throne. But the reunion wasn't a happy ending. It was the beginning of the end. By killing Dario, Griselda had solidified her reputation, but she had also isolated herself completely. She was officially dubbed the Black Widow. The nickname wasn't new, but now it was a legal fact. Her inner circle began to shrink. The lieutenants looked at her differently now. They realized that if she could kill the father of her favorite son over a dispute, then nobody, absolutely nobody, was safe. The loyalty that had held the organization together began to curdle into pure fear. And fear is a brittle foundation. It cracks under pressure. Dario's death marked the psychological turning point of the Miami drug wars. It proved that the old codes of honor were dead. Family dinners were just as dangerous as street deals. The bedroom was as dangerous as the boardroom. Griselda had proven that for the godmother, the line between husband and liability simply did not exist when millions of dollars and her own blood were on the line. The lesson that echoed through the underworld was simple, brutal, and final. In this life, you can steal the money, you can steal the product, you might even survive stealing the territory, but you never ever steal the bloodline. As you look back at that dusty parking lot in 1983, looking at the white Ford LTD idling with a dead man behind the wheel and a fake badge on the dashboard, you have to ask yourself the question that haunts this entire story. Was this truly a rescue mission for a mother who missed her son? Or was that badge just a receipt for the stolen millions, and the boy was simply the property she was repossessing? If you found this story intense, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications because the archives are full of stories they don't want you to know. And tell me in the comments, if you were in Dario's position, knowing who you were married to, would you have ever stopped for that badge? I'll see you in the next one.